Next up, I actually need some code that's going to create an entity and populate it. Let's move this around. So if we've done a submission, I need to rename this to Bill and to Brian. It's actually setting the names of the fields in the entity we want to set. I'm getting them from the values that came in from my post. So at this point, I actually have a populated entity I can use. And lastly, I actually need to write that out to the database, or to Azure Table Storage, as it were. And this line handles that. So using the table name we set up above, here, we're going to insert the entity we created here into that table. Pretty straightforward and simple. But there's still one piece missing. How do we know we actually wrote it? So in our case, I'm going to include a quick little sample here that just pulls in and shows us what's sitting in the table today. The first line here, we'll use it, the storage client, and it'll retrieve all the entities from the table. And then I'm using the PHP function var dump just so I can dump them out and see the results. Let's go ahead and save this and hope I did my job correctly. We're going to change this back to true so I can test this in the local development emulator. Oh, I got to clean up that file first. There we go. So it's going through and deploying my updated web application back out to the development emulator on the pesky little error messages. And let's change the file name to table sample, which is the one I was just working with. Yay, no errors. So field value 1. Then some values here, and we'll insert them. Okay, we're not seeing any error messages. I do see my entity inserted. And if we do a real quick view on the source, we can actually see the var dump that occurs. So in this case, I can see there's Brianna, and there's Cole for the one row that's out there. I can see my partition keys and everything else. So this shows me that I actually inserted and then retrieved that row. Or for those of us that want something a little more robust, we can slip over to our storage client. There's the table I created. There's the one row that I created. And look, there's my columns, Bill and Brian with values of Brianna and Colin. But this is just a really quick, very rudimentary retrieval sample. If we wanted to, let me get back over to my editor, we can actually do some quick filtering. So I have another query here that I've saved. Back over to table sample, comment that out, and let's now end up saying field bill needs to be equal to the value of Wednesday. So if I save this and redeploy, some of these things are sitting around here while we wait for this. Oh, yet another annoying confirmation message. And go back over to, and now I can put in Wednesday. My two values and hit my insert. And if I view what we've got in here, what I find is I've got the row for Wednesday, and that's the only row I ended up retrieving. Even if I go back over to Storage Studio, do a quick little refresh, and now see that there really were two rows in that database, but it only brought back the one I want. Now the problem with this is I queried on row bill, or on property bill. Bill is not part of the partition key and row key. So if this is a really big table, it would have scanned the entire Azure table trying to find that row. In my case, since it's one little tiny one, and it just so happens the partition key was the same, I could have added the partition key in, saved myself a little bit of time. Probably doesn't mean a whole lot given the size of my table. So that's it for the demos. One last thing to show you, because we still have a little bit of time, you guys just haven't been asking enough questions today, is a website called Cole Can Do That. So one of the key things I've had asked me a couple of times from people around PHP and Windows Azure is, why would I want to do this? There's a lot of really cheap, really inexpensive, and in some cases really high quality website hosts out there that run PHP, and they do it a lot less expensively than Windows Azure does. The answer is it depends on what your needs are. In this case, we had a website that had some security problems. They were paying a lot of money for hosting that wasn't as good as they wanted. They wanted some guaranteed uptime. So they came to our company and asked us, can you help us move this website over to Windows Azure? The name in right. So this particular website, when we first started, was a complete LAMP solution. LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. In about 40 hours worth of effort, we migrated the entire solution over to run on Windows Azure. So if I click on this, I'll still see that I'm using PHP names. Response time is not too bad, but all the content you're seeing in here is coming from Windows Azure tables. In the case of some of the stuff here on this home page, we flip back over, if I do a view source on here, you'll notice that some of the images that are being displayed aren't actually even coming from the website. Some of this stuff's actually coming directly from a Windows Azure blob storage account and is being served up to me publicly so I can see it. Now, what this allowed us to do is not only meet the client's immediate needs of getting the site ported over and making it more secure, but because we're not using a file-based storage system the way a lot of PHP content management systems tend to do, or at least did, everything gets uploaded to Azure storage. So even if somebody were maliciously to gain access to the file upload system, they can't install executable code back into my website. And on the rare chance that something were to occur, if the website was restarted, it reverts back to the original image and all malicious changes would be reverted out. So in this case, it was a real upside for the client. The site's been running perfectly without a single outage for almost 14 months now. The database keeps humming along. Everything works great for them. They're totally thrilled. Back to the presentation. We've hopefully covered the basics that we set out to do here. We discussed the Windows Azure, what it is, the SDK for PHP in Windows Azure. We showed you some examples of how to put it to work and actually add some Windows Azure into your PHP site, and then gave you some examples of hitting both Azure Blob and table storage. Now, I really just scratched the surface, especially on topics like Windows Azure and how to really leverage different aspects of it from PHP. So I've dug up some additional links for you. Azure PHP out of Interoperability Bridges has some great information. The Silver Lining blog has some great examples. Don't forget to hit Martin's blog, where he continually is doing new updates, or grab the PHP Azure CodeFlex project. So that's all I had for today. My contact information is here at the bottom. Please feel free to email me. I try to be very responsive. You can follow me on Twitter, or if you want to see some more learning experiences with PHP and Windows Azure, I've got a couple of blog posts up on my personal blog, as well as a complete copy of the slide deck, the script demos, and the sample files from the examples we went through today. Or if you're just in the mood for something that's more general as far as cloud computing goes, I have another blog I update semi-frequently that just contains kind of the latest industry trends when it comes to cloud computing. So that's all I have for today. Unless we have any questions, I'll turn things back over to our host.